In this video, I'm going to attempt to repair a SONY STR-DE915. It worked fine for 18 years, and then one day the center channel started to sound real staticky and muted. Everything else worked fine. It was just the center channel in 5.1 movies. So I removed the cover and blew the dust out. And then I closely inspected all the components. I bought some 3x reading glasses, and I also have a magnifying glass, and it really helps me get in to visually inspect all the solder points. And on the rear access panel, I found a whole bunch of cracked solder joints, mainly around parts that had brown heat marks on the circuit boards. These two had cracked solder joints, IC801, IC803, and on the surround board, also IC501. So I reflowed all the cracked solder joints. And then I took my capacitor meter and tested as many of the capacitors that I could. And I found two capacitors right here on the surround board that are reading out of spec. These are both 16 volt 100 microfarad caps, and they should read no higher than 0.7. This one reads 2.7, and this one reads 7.1, so they're super off spec. I used some solder wick to remove the solder. And I pull on the cap from the other side of the board. Sometimes I gotta use the soldering iron to pull it out, and the little cap pops out. Now I'll test the caps out of circuit. This one reads 2.6. This one reads 7.0. These are the caps I'm going to replace them with. I salvaged these from an old motherboard, and these both read good. This one reads 0.5, and this one reads 0.5. So these are both good caps. So I take the capacitor, make sure the stripe is lined up. Stripe is negative. It's got to go in the right way. Put it into the holes. You'll notice on the board there's a positive, so the negative goes in the opposite hole. And then I'll solder it. Also notice on this amp board, IC701 has a brown heat mark, and it looks like this board is kind of easy to pull out, just some connectors and some screws. And yes, the board came out. Now I'll be able to check the backside for cracked solder joints and test the capacitors. And just as I suspected, there's a whole bunch of cracked solder joints, and all the caps are good except for these two right here that are reading bad. I'm going to pull them and test them. These are 50 volt 10 microfarad caps. Should read no higher than 1.6. This one reads 19, and this other cap doesn't read at all, so I think it's open. So these are both really bad caps. And I found two caps that'll work in this old junked radio. And the replacement caps, first one is 0.7, and the second one 0.8. So these are both good caps. So I reflow the cold solder joints. Okay. Okay, I soldered in those two caps, put the board back in. Now it's time to test it out. Hey, hey, hey! Sounding good. Center channel is fixed. Ended up being a bunch of cold solder joints and 4 bad capacitors.